There's three different individuals, three different questions, but it's basically three members of the school board, and the organizers of this recall, they had to get a lot of signatures to get it on the ballot. But if they could, they would recall all seven of them. That's how unhappy they are with the board's performance as a whole. And these boards tend to kind of do things together. Like most of their votes would generally be unanimous. So that, and, it's kind of up to you to determine whether, if one person is super bad or the board, does something you don't like, that they should all be kicked out and replaced, like some of the organizers are suggesting. Uh, so it does take a little research into each of these members. One of them is super controversial. It'd be pretty easy to develop an opinion on that person. Person being Alison Collins. Second person is the president of the board, which is Gabriela López. She's a president. Some could fault her for being a strong ally and supporter of Alison Collins. Alison Collins is easily the most controversial figure. And then the third individual is Faauuga Moliga, who's been pretty quiet. And so there's not a lot of controversy against him. So in general, let me say that, and I'm sure Bowden can speak to this more. And if you've been seeing the headlines the past couple of years, you can see how this recall started. COVID happened. There was, the school shut down. And also during that time, there were certain actions by the school board, including renaming schools, condemning the Washington murals, things like Lowell admissions turning into a lottery because during COVID, the reasoning was there was no way to measure how one student stacked up against another student because they didn't do standardized testing, I believe, for that year. This school board was working on that while other districts around the country opened up sooner, and so a lot of parents were unhappy about it, and so they organized. Also, and we're gonna get into each of these more in detail, but just giving a quick overview. There's also questions of how well this board managed itself and the district. The district has been in some hot water financially for the last few years, and they were even almost taken over by the state. I think just last month in December, they finally approved a budget that would cut something like 100 million from the school district budget, in order to kind of balance the books and avoid the state taking over, which would have resulted in similar cuts. Now it's just that with this, we kind of choose where we're cutting. And some people blame them for not managing the budget well enough.
Did they make a statement on that?
Like their reasoning for
to defend themselves against all the accusations?
Yeah, but from my research, and I wish I had the links ready, to me they didn't feel super substantive as to the reasoning why they didn't tackle this problem sooner. And the articles around the city from different publications, they all source staff members of the board saying that, hey, they've been bringing up the issue for months to a year about how hey, the budget needs addressing. We need to have a plan. So that's kind of a point against them, and maybe if we have time, we can try to look up quickly if there's a good reason for not addressing the budget, right? So one could say, and we'll get into this later, step by step, but one could say that we were spending money on COVID precaution measures, so it was necessary for us to go this much in the red in order to prevent further deterioration of learning and whatnot. And so basically it's inexcusable that they're facing state takeover for the finances. Let's start from the top then. Let's have general thoughts on it. Like, are you guys deciding on this by the individual board members, or are you guys thinking about individually, or as a collective, we should condemn the whole board and just kick them all out, get some new people, and hopefully it's better? Especially folks that work in the district, if you feel direct observations from the board's decisions, such as, you know, the new budget they passed last December, which is just a few weeks ago, or, you know, if you felt like they were dragging their feet on negotiating with teachers, trying to get the schools open. I understand the teachers were more hesitant to get back in the classroom for the most part. But I guess the question right now is kind of the main question is, how well did they address reopening schools after COVID, or, you know, during COVID?
So Jenny asked, when would they start implementing the new budget, the new school year?
When does yeah, it's when the fiscal year starts. I'll try to look it up and see exactly where they're cutting from. I think it says voting individually. Recall Collins and Lopez was added in position. That's true. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, I couldn't find anything really showing that Moliga was doing anything crazy.
For like Moliga, I feel like he's the what, treasurer? So yeah, what's his personal statement? I haven't actually read anything yet.
Or from the voter guide thing?
Yeah.
I have two here. Okay, yeah, I would say, okay, Moliga, he said, I'm the first Pacific Islander ever selected. He's giving the Pacific Islander community a voice in the local government. He authored legislation that will increase teacher retention through construction of teacher housing. He said he authored legislation regarding transportation that will save the district over $20 million and improve services to students and families. And then he says, COVID has created a volatile situation, exposing aging structures as unhealthy work environments, causing fiscal difficulty. Through painstaking planning, we address the facilities challenges, and with the development of vaccines and federal stimulus dollars, the district will emerge from this pandemic on solid footing. The Board of Education adheres to all legal requirements regarding giving the public notice and opportunity to speak on all matters before the board. While I have been a commissioner, the board has not deviated from these requirements. He's addressing several criticisms. We can talk about the budget. We can talk about how they run the board meetings, because that's another criticism of the president, saying that they didn't give parents enough time to speak because parents were pissed about the situation. The teachers union is against the recall. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, against the recall of Moliga, or all of the?
All three of them, apparently.
Oh, interesting. Can you share screen?
Okay. Let's see. Summing it up for us. Good.
How much it will cost for everything to take effect?
That's a good point too.
Oh, like if they get recalled, then you have to spend money to do another election, or does someone appoint them?
The mayor will appoint the replacements until the next scheduled election, which I actually don't know when the next election for those seats are. But actually, we're already having the recall, so the money has been spent. The Board of Supervisors had a vote about whether the city wanted to kind of pay for this recall in order to avoid the district having to spend money, and obviously that takes away money from the kids and the programs. But ultimately the city said no, they weren't going to pay for this recall. So this is hitting the kids and the teachers anyways, like right now. So that's kind of a moot point. I don't know when the union published this document. Maybe that was before it actually hit the ballot, but now that we're here, the money is being spent. It's like $3.5 million.
December 2021.
What's another main point? Oh yeah, okay.
Union doesn't trust the mayor to appoint the right people.
It's pretty spicy. I mean, that's part of a more general conversation, because the mayor is more moderate and less liberal. And we're not going to talk crazy politics, but generally this board is very progressive, as we've seen by their actions. What are they doing? They've been renaming the schools. They've been criticizing, trying to take down the murals. So there's some politics at play here as well, for sure.
And also added, new members are going to be voted in later this year, so it just seems unnecessary considering the short time span. When you say like new board members, do you mean
for these 3 seats?
Yeah, for these 3 seats, or do you just mean there's going to be additional board members?
That's a good point. I don't remember the exact timelines, because there was a reason only 3 were eligible for recall, and that might have been because they've been sitting on the board for the longest time.
These 3 are the only ones that are available to have new members. The other members were voted in a year or 2 ago.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a good point. If you believe that recalls are, a waste of money, and you just, out of principle, you're just voting on that idea alone, that like, hey, we're gonna do elections for these 3 seats in a few months, we're just wasting money recalling people, including the DA, including the governor, what have you, then you might vote against the recall, just in principle of wanting recall reform.
What about so if these 3 seats are going to get voted in the next few months anyways, how come the union is, I guess, oh wait, no, because the union doesn't want to spend the money, right?
Well,
I mean, well, you said the union doesn't trust the mayor to appoint the right people.
Yeah, and that's kind of the counterpoint to the timing argument, is that even though there are going to be new elections for these seats soon, there's still a lot of very important work to do in that time remaining, right? So that is, depending on your view, right, like the union says, we don't want new, breed appointed people making these important decisions. Like, I believe the district, one of the most important duties is to hire a superintendent, and I think that decision is coming. So important decisions like that, including, right, are we going to go to all online in the next few weeks because of COVID? The argument against the timing question is that, we have important decisions to make in the time remaining for this term, and whether we want these people or breeds people or just someone new, because these people are just, disapproving them for whatever reason.
Said the angle that the union wants is to be able to control who gets into the board. If the mayor appoints new board members, is it interim, and then when the election season comes, then then I feel like it kind of addresses the union's concern about like, oh, we don't want people. That's what happened with Jenny Lamb.
She's a breed appointee, right? Yeah, she's still on the board, because she's not. Oh, and then she was voted in. Oh yeah, because you have an advantage if you've been appointed to it, because then you get to say like, hey, I was doing this job. Right. So,
or who breed likes.
Yeah, I don't know who she's thinking about, but so that's that angle.
She
I
was
don't know.
endorsed by the union too.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I mean, do you guys like these kind of political questions? Do you guys make your decisions on these, on this kind of line of thinking, right? Something for you to think about, or if anyone has any thoughts, please, if you're comfortable sharing. Because there's other questions, right? There's other decision points that might also affect your vote, besides the political questions of, well, then these guys are going to come in. So they are important questions. They're all very, very important points. Let me try to pull up some other.
I'm really curious what is everyone else's angle, mainly because like I'm curious what the perspective is outside of being a teacher, being part of education. So I'm really curious what y'all think.
For sure. On this specific point of the
Oh, just to recall as a whole.
as a whole, I would say the two, Collins and Lopez, are probably for sure getting recalled. I think that's the vibe across the city. It's like extremely rare for, first of all, remember the city sued the school district, what, 6 months ago? Yeah, I don't know.
It was what is it, Alison Collins, right? It was Alison Collins who. Oh no, the city. Oh no, you're right. It was the city who sued the school district. You're right.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that the mayor and other dominant names would come out and say, hey, we need to extraordinarily kick these people out of office, as opposed to, hey, we just need to run some people against them next election. So, and again, this is the first recall that's been successful in 40 years in San Francisco. It just shows that a lot of people, whether you think it's justified or not based on the headlines, a lot of people are currently, very disapproving of those two members. What's the vibe inside the schools from the staff and teachers?
That's a good question. The people that I talk to are mainly endorsing what the union says, which is they don't support it because of the reasons that they mentioned. I just deviated from it because of what you said about timing. It's just like, what you said about like there are big things that still need to happen within this time between. So it's like, why not just make it happen? Yes, it'll cost us money, but at least that money will be going towards something productive and not like sitting there doing nothing, So
I'll introduce some of these kind of things that made headlines, especially for some of the individual folks. Well, mainly, let's talk about the most controversial person, Alison Collins. This controversy didn't just start, it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I need to probably pull up some of these headlines, but long story short, there were some tweets that came out that revealed that she tweeted about, she was basically criticizing the Asian American community, as basically not being strong enough allies in the fight for social justice and racial justice. She used some, pretty strong language, saying, well, how do I say this, right? She was like, basically, you guys are also, you guys being you Asians and you Chinese folks, are also being oppressed by the system. You guys need to be better allies. And then the controversial words she used was, a house N-word is still an N-word, basically, right? Did you guys see that headline? And I don't know how you guys feel about it. Obviously, the organized Asian communities were very disappointed with it, especially because Alison Collins, she wasn't like crazy before that. She was an ally in all of the those organized Asian groups in their initiatives to help students and stuff like that. But she didn't apologize. This was a big controversy. The board that she sits on, they all voted to strip her of her like job title in the board, and so she got mad about that. So she went and filed a lawsuit, seeking $87 million in damages from the San Francisco Unified School District, and this money would come from the SFUSD. budget, which would directly take away from programs, teachers, students. And then this lawsuit was tossed out. First of all, there was this really savage takedown of her lawsuit from this local reporter. I'll try to find it. But basically the lawsuit was tossed out. There was like a lot of typing mistakes and everything. So a really bad look for Mrs. Alison Collins.
She probably hired the wrong lawyer. Like if she asked for a more, like a lesser amount,
Mhm.
she might have, she might have actually gotten the lawsuit in her favor. But 87 million sounded pretty ridiculous, so I'm just like, oh.
But didn't Steven just claim that there's someone, local news reporter that like basically said that her lawsuit had no value to it, like there's no valuable claims that she could actually make.
An actual judge in a court of law said that and threw it out. But the local reporter reporting on that story also kind of like, he had the legal documents and he noticed like, hey, there's a lot of crazy stories, a lot of typos, very unprofessional document. So this reflects very, very poorly on her. I mean, I could even be very nice and go as far as to say, hey, her points about the Asian American community, there's something to it. Obviously, the words she used, weren't very PC. She mentioned like some racism at Lowell High School and maybe things she's heard from Asian parents. And and the reason why I don't 100% fault her for her point of view, she could use better words, is because, I know Asian parents, we know Asian parents, we know that they're not the most PC. And they're clearly, most Asian parents are not allies. As our Asian parents, like immigrant Asian parents, they're not allies of the Black and brown community. Maybe second gen, maybe third gen Asian parents is who she's really criticizing. But at any rate, her words and everything that came after just made her look really unprofessional. And trying to seek $87 million from the school districts is, how do you wrap your head around that? I don't know how you can defend that necessarily, even though, and then this gets into the next board member, Gabriela López, who's been supporting her throughout all this. So that looks really bad.
I didn't know she supported her.
Yeah, that's part of these local boards being very kind of close knit, very cooperative, right? Which is a good thing. They need to work together to get things done. But in this case, it seems like Gabriela, she's not a politician, but if so she was, she didn't realize how toxic this situation was. And especially among very progressives, there's always language about being allies of each other and being on the right side. So some less articulate points of view are saying if you're for the recall, you're racist, you're not an ally of the social justice movement. I don't know if anybody has that point of view. If anybody is voting against recall for that reason, right? The response would be like, hey, I understand these three folks are people of color. It's not racism to vote them out and bring someone else in, right? Like just bring in the next person of color, and then it's not racism anymore. So if anyone has any thoughts about that. Gloria said the 87 million is what she would personally gain. Yes, she would personally gain that. Maybe that pays for lawyers, but I don't think lawyers are worth 87 million. So that's what she asked for, that she wanted the judge to force the school district to give her as a result of damages and defamation, whatever else she was claiming that the school district had wronged her for, which is an incredible sum of money. So to maybe provoke any conversation, especially on Alison Collins, does anybody want to take up the case that she should not be recalled, that she's doing all right? I mean, I probably presented the case kind of biasedly.
Do you know how long she's been on the board?
Great question. I don't know why I closed all my links.
I think she was voted in 2016.
2016. So she's been like a board member for 6 years. I guess I
It's either 2016 or 2018. I don't remember which one.
The Wikipedia says 2019.
Mm,
So this was like wait, was COVID 2019 or 2020? I think it was 2019.
COVID started March of 2020.
Oh shit. All right. Yeah. Anyone want to defend Mrs. Collins?
like I'm leaning towards recalling just because of the recent events that happened. But I think it would be also like one question that kind of stems from all of this is like, okay, what else has she done in her time as a board member? So I can get a more holistic picture of her contributions. But right now I'm leaning against recall.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, she's been an ally on the on the left, on the progressive side. For example, she advocated for, of course, doing away with the Washington murals, right? Reasoning being she wants to create an environment that is more, friendly or less oppressive to students at Wash that are, Black, Brown, Native American. As well, she wanted to reform admission policy at Lowell, right, in the name of equity, because, the student body doesn't reflect the greater population. So, she's been, if you believe those are good actions that society needs, then she has been an outspoken advocate for those things. Does that I don't know if that sways anyone to keeping her on the board?
That kind of does. I mean, I think it's good about the low emission thing.
And we can take that question up later as well, because that's also part of the larger discussion. I'm biased. I'm recalling her. And in response to the good things that she has done, I would say, hey, in San Francisco, there's about 4,000 other people that has the same feelings for these issues, and none of them are named Alison Collins. Let's just bring one of them in and say goodbye to Alison Collins. So that's just the against side, I guess. Okay, hearing none, let's go to Gabriela López, the current president of the board. The main criticism against her, besides supporting Alison Collins throughout all this, is that the way she ran the meetings, as well as the priorities of work for the board. So first, there was some criticism. I don't think we're going to dive too deep into this, about how she, some of these heated discussions about, with public comment from teachers about their opinions about how they should open or reopen the schools. There's some criticism that she kind of pushed it all the way to the end of the meeting, how she was kind of biased or something when she, structured the meetings. If anyone has any comment on that, I don't have any, because I didn't experience it necessarily. So besides that, as a president, right, it's a lot of responsibility falls on her. Like, why does she continue work on renaming the schools, destroying the mural, as opposed to figuring out how to adjust COVID policy to open schools as soon as they could. The one thing we can talk about the merits of is the school board refused to hire a consultant to figure out a strategy to reopen the schools. And this is a somewhat interesting question, because it's a small point that might sway you one way or the other, whether you think this was a good idea or not a good idea. Obviously, it'd be a good idea if you need some expert advice on how we should open schools, but it'd be a bad idea if you think like, hey, these consultants just, they don't provide that much value, and the school board is being smart in trying to figure it out themselves, which, as we see with all these signatures, trying to recall them, that I guess they didn't do too good of a job, because people are quite angry about how they reopened or didn't reopen.
So they wanted to hire a consultant, or they didn't want to hire a consultant?
They did not want, so they voted on whether they should, and I believe they all voted unanimously not to hire a consultant. Yeah.
I think it was the superintendent that brought it up to them, to hire a consultant to figure out the COVID situation, and then the union voted against it. The union voted against it. Oh, sorry, not the union, sorry, the board. The board.
I feel like they don't need a consultant because they're supposed to be qualified to like handle this stuff. Maybe, I don't know. But having an outside opinion is also good,
Well, if I remember correctly, the consultant had like knowledge of how other school districts were handling the COVID situation and what were like safe guidelines. And no offense to the board at all, but I mean, it sounds like the consultant understands like the science to a different level. And so I think that, yes, you say that they're qualified, but also like COVID is a very special case where I think having like somewhat of a specialist in the conversation can help move conversations forward. So
yeah, if they don't have the time to focus all of their attention on handling COVID matters. Because like in my mind, I'm like, okay, so like if you're a board member, can't you just call up someone else in another like district and say, hey, like how are you guys like don't they already talk to people already? I wouldn't but I also understand like, okay, like if there's already a specialist who's 100% focused on this matter and thoroughly knows what's going on in several districts, it's like a shortcut rather than having the board do its own research, even though I think that should be the top priority. Then yeah, it makes sense to have a consultant.
Yeah, I don't think this is not a point that most voters will base their whole vote on. I think it could go either way. In some areas, you respect that the board wants to save this money, and maybe want to, I don't know, hire another teacher or staff at some school, right? So that's a respectable decision if that was what their intent is, which it could be. But at the same time, I don't. These Board of Education is not supposed to be a full-time gig, so, and I guess this showed in that they didn't have a great plan. That people are quite angry, and the city even sued them for not having a plan.
Wait, how much time do they spend as a board member? Because you can't fault them if they only spend like 1 hour, 2 hours a week.
Yeah, they get paid per meeting. I think they can expense some work hours, but it's not like an official full-time job like the board of supervisors.
Well, then in that case, if they're not 100% like spending their time on this, then I feel like a consultant is warranted.
So that would be a point to recall them if you felt that way. All right. Let's see. What else? Going to maybe a broader question here. I think in general, the question is, one point being made is, do you think the board has been too focused on their ideological activism, their social justice policies, as opposed to the kind of the more basic responsibilities, right? Such as, having a relatively balanced budget and obviously COVID reopening. You know, if you're
Wait, what's the
available,
question?
um, the question was, do you think that they've been neglecting their main kind of boring duties and instead trying to enact policies that are more aggressively social justice? Uh, that is one criticism that, you know, some reporters have brought up. So I'll just bring that up. But also, you know, if you are available to speak and you have a general opinion on the matter, feel free to voice it. Because, you know, most parents, they don't really, you know, they're not signed on 100% to be like, we need to, you know, take down the mural, we need to rename schools, right? They want a functioning school district for their kids to learn in.
Do you know what rank SF school district is compared to other school districts? Or does you know? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Some of these the like organizers website, obviously they'll make the claim that SF is poor performing, which is, you know, because they want to recall the school board. I don't have all of the stuff, but yeah.
To be honest, I don't really. This topic is very new to me, but I think the biggest concern, like the issue about reopening schools and making it safe and like getting kids back in school, I think that is like the biggest issue for the most amount of people. So I think that that deserves the most attention.
Yeah, I'm with Roy here. Like, I'd be totally okay with them pushing their own like agenda, but I think they neglected the COVID situation, which is problematic for me.
Yeah, you know, I think Gabriela, she made some remarks toward the beginning of COVID, toward the beginning of the school shutdowns, that it was like okay for the kids to be out of school, that they're just learning differently at home. Obviously, that comment is not aging well. But yeah, by now we know that kids are suffering from not being in school. So yeah. I know.
Yeah, I think this isn't based off of like any statistics or anything, but I'd imagine that students who are like students that come from less privileged families or families that have less money are probably like more negatively affected. Like the learning loss is more significant, just because those families don't have as many resources to, you know, keep their child keep their child learning, I guess.
Yeah, and if it's noisy at home and you have like 3 different children and you
Yeah.
try to find a spot for all of them, it's like, oh, the headache. And what if your Wi-Fi doesn't work? Then Zoom
Yeah.
starts to lag. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, if I was like stuck at home, if this happened when we were in school, dude, I'd be like, you know, I'd be pretty retarded nowadays because you know, what my parents were gonna teach me, right? So yeah. Let's see. Does anyone have any points they want to bring up or any more thoughts on this? I think I mean, it feels to be a consensus in the room.
I'm not sure about
Faauuga.
Faauuga,
True.
because I feel like it's like, how much power and how much say did he have in all of this? I don't know. He did put out a statement, which, I mean, like, I feel like his statement kind of like, oh, okay, makes me less inclined to vote to recall him.
Yeah. His statement's kind of, Okay, his main argument was that he represents the Pacific Islander community, and he has, I
And
think,
he had authored legislation.
Mhm.
Oh, he did work.
yeah, and addressing the specific comments about the fiscal situation, he said that the development of vaccines and federal stimulus dollars, the district will emerge from this pandemic on solid footing. Kind of a suspect statement given the situation. Then he also says that the board adheres to all legal requirements regarding the giving public notice and opportunity to speak on all matters before the board. He says that, you know, the board hasn't broken any of those rules. Cool. I mean, you know, it's kind of, he's just saying that, like, no, we did everything right and we're going to be fine fiscally, which, you know, I mean, I don't think it's reason to recall somebody for those. Like, he has to make those comments because he's part of the board that created the situation. In another, I forget which document this was, but he also said that he was clear throughout 2020 and 2021 that he wanted schools open as soon as possible. He was also supportive of the Community Hubs initiative, playing a crucial role in getting a hub opened in Viz Valley. My focus during and before this pandemic has been on increasing enrollment, fiscal responsibility, improving learning, and he's authored resolution to increase enrollments, opening an enrollment center in Southeast SF, upgrade transportation and mental health services, increase learning opportunities, build housing to retain teachers. So yeah. Yeah, it's hard. What do you guys think about Faauuga? There's not much press on him, not much data on Faauuga. So me personally, I probably won't vote to recall Faauuga. The only reason you recall, given the lack of information, is whether you think that the whole board should be
Held accountable.
yeah,
for
held
it.
accountable or punished or whatever. So
The election's coming up in a few months, right? So I feel like at that point I see all the candidates, and then like if I think someone else can do better than him, then I would vote for another person. But at this point, like you said, there's not enough information.
good strategy by Faauuga. Stay quiet. Any other thoughts on these three questions here? Is anybody still unsure of, you know, which way they want to go on any of these? All right, that being said, then we'll transition over to the other interesting question on the ballot. You know, this will only be if you live on the right half of San Francisco. You're going to be voting to send somebody to the state assembly. And these folks are David Campos, who used to be supervisor in San Francisco. Currently, he's like the vice chair of the California Democratic Party. So there's that. Matt Haney is supervisor for the Tenderloin District 6 in San Francisco. Thea Selby, who is a trustee for the City College Board. She's the only woman running. She's the only mom, obviously. And she's cool. She's run for a lot of things before, so she's really involved. And then there's Bilal Mahmood, who has a pretty impressive resume. He worked in the Obama administration. He's an entrepreneur. He's a philanthropist. He's kind of the outsider in this race. So those that live on the right side, the right half of San Francisco, Crystal, Jenny, what are general thoughts on you know, who you're going to send to Sacramento?
Matt Haney was my district supervisor, and I don't think I had any like qualms against him or anything like that. So I'm probably gonna just end up voting for him.
Uh, Jenny, everyone, a lot of people receive those, like a lot of voters. I mean, I'm sure everyone's received them by now. The campaigns can go to the San Francisco Department of Elections and get your phone number and your address. And this is all perfectly legal, apparently. So yeah, some people are very comfortable with it. Like, I've worked on campaigns and we've had to text people and call people. So it's like, some are like, how the hell did you get your number? Unfortunately, this is a thing that campaigns can do. And this is, I guess, this encourages people to run, right? Because it's publicly available information. So if you were a nobody and you wanted to run for office, you can go to the Department of Elections and say, hey, can we get a list of the voters? So that's why you receive those. Yeah, even if if you don't see them on your ballot, right? The interesting questions in the race, right? So the front runners are Haney and Campos. And it's kind of hard to try to suss out their differences because everyone's, a Democrat. DSLB is clearly the most someone with the stance. Yeah, so I was saying it's hard to differentiate Haney and Campos. And by the way, this race is a race that we might be voting on this year a total of 4 times. So we're gonna have maybe 4 elections this year. The reason being is because this election is just to finish out the last term. The next term starts next year. So we have to vote for somebody for the next term as well. So we might be voting 4 times for these people. So as far as the differences, right? One was that there was a project, it was like a 500 story, not story, sorry, 500 unit building in Stevenson, downtown somewhere. And
Affordable housing or just?
a certain percentage of affordable housing. It wasn't all affordable housing, but it would, would have added whatever units to the housing stock. So it's in Matt Haney's district. Matt Haney was for it. He wanted it to be built, and all of these projects have to be passed and approved by the Board of Supervisors. But what happened was, for whatever reason, most of the board, I think like 7 or 9 out of 11 members, voted against the project, effectively canceling it, or not, putting it on a long pause, saying that this project did not pass the whatever requirements, right, environmental or whatever, and so the developers have to go back with the city planner to, come up with better plans for the project. This was surprising because most of the time, if the project is happening in the supervisor's district and the supervisor says yes or no, then everyone else just follows what that supervisor says. So the question was, why were supervisors like not allowing this project to be built, right? So this goes into the general question of NIMBYism or YIMBYism, right? How do we address affordable housing? Campos, even though he's not a supervisor, he was against the project. So this is one area of difference between the two. Haney was supporting the project, Campos was against.
Why?
Why? Because Haney, he's saying that basically market rate housing is fine, right? We need to just build more, right? That's kind of how he's positioning himself. Campos was saying that he is for all kinds of housing, but he wanted more affordable housing. So this is how, supervisors negotiate with developers to say, hey, if you're not going to do, 30% affordable or, 40%, depending how aggressive the supervisor is, then I'm not going to approve this project. And so this is one area of distinction between the two candidates, right? So in general, if you believe that allowing more market rate housing will help alleviate the cost of rent and the number of housing in the city, then you want the candidate that is just going to build, whether it's market rate or affordable housing, or maybe they would negotiate 20% affordable versus some more aggressive, progressive supervisors that says, hey, I want 100% affordable, which obviously makes it very hard for developers to want to build those. That being said, the candidate that is the most, the guy that wants the most housing, no matter what, 100% is Bilal Mahmoud. He's saying that we should just do away with most zoning requirements and most restrictions and just build whatever you want, wherever you want, essentially, right? Obviously, that's not going to happen if he becomes the assembly, but that's kind of how he feels. That's how badly he wants housing units to be built as soon as possible, because, you know, I guess he believes that supply and demand, right? You just got to increase supply and demand goes down for everybody. So this is an interesting question, right? So it doesn't matter if these folks are on your ballot or not. If anybody has any thoughts on this, you know, this question specifically, right? It's how to possibly encourage housing to be built and reduce prices, housing cost of living. Any thoughts around the room?
I'm kind of siding with Bilal on this because we need housing, a lot of housing, and I think it's okay if we relax the zoning regulations. There'd just be more neighborhoods with both, I guess, commercial and residential buildings at the same time on the same street, which I think is fine. Maybe the business on the bottom and then a house, I mean, apartment on top or something. Or maybe just build higher with more levels. I don't know.
Well, the big pushback about that is like San Francisco's pretty like notorious for not wanting to do that, mainly because like there's been a big conversation, or like I don't want to say the older generation has always wanted to, like San Francisco to not turn into like Manhattan, where again it's just a bunch of high rises. So yeah, but it's true though. It's like the supply and demand thing. Like if you just build more, there won't be this big issue. But I don't know. It's just hard to. I just find it hard to convince so many people in San Francisco to want to build higher, because like the big consensus is let's not build higher.
Well, a district assembly is for all of California, right?
Yeah.
So this would affect California, houses in California, in addition to, including housing in San Francisco.
Yeah. Like when you're electing people to the assembly, right? I don't know how many people, I think it's like 80 people in there. You know, if you elect any of these folks, they're not going to immediately change state legislation overnight, right? But if they're in the room, they're going to be, you know, talking about what they believe in. So in Bilal's crazy statement where he says he wants anything and everything built anywhere, right? Just get it up. That's obviously not going to happen. But when he's in the discussions and the negotiations for housing reform bills, he's gonna advocate for more relaxed zoning things. Yeah, Campos, interestingly enough, he is the more moderate person. He's not the most. I think Dia Selby is the most moderate person, right? Always in debates, they're always saying like, yeah, we need housing, we need to build housing, we need affordable housing, but you know, we need to listen to the community as well. You'll have to ask yourself, right? This, in order to solve this kind of communal or societal problem of housing, would you be able to make that sacrifice, right? Would you want to spend an extra 5 minutes looking for parking, or would you want to walk an extra 2 blocks away to park your car if you know, if that's what it takes to lower the rent for other people? So I don't know. That's kind of the problem right now, right? Let's see. There's other issues on the ballot for state assembly. One thing about Bilal is that he is the outsider. He's for like universal basic income. He's for, tech. He's kind of a tech guy. And he believes in like technology to solve society's problems. And like his website, for example, he is the most detailed as far as policy goes. So I kind of like his approach to politics. He's like a problem solver. He's all about what are the outcomes going to be for whatever policies. If you compare, so this is Bilal's platform on his website, and it's quite detailed. It says explicitly what the problem is, his bold idea, what he's going to do immediately, and what his long-term goal is. He does that for different things. Algebra, apparently controversial. Keep schools open, increase teacher salaries. But anyways, compare that to David Campos, who raised minimum wage. So this is what he fights for. He's what also sets him apart is that he's an immigrant. He came at age 14 with his family, carried his sister on his back. So it's a very powerful personal story. I think, yeah, he's the only like actual immigrant. Bilal is a son of immigrants. And this matters if you vote based on identity politics, which is important too in some areas, right? Dia is the only woman, things like that. So, anyways, just something to note. It's going to take more research, also because this is going to be on our ballots for the whole year, basically. And when we get back together, for sure, we'll suss out the differences between the candidates. I'm sure it'll be more clear in the next few months. Because I think this is the primary on our ballots right now. I think the top two, we have to vote again. If no one gets more than a certain percentage, we're going to be voting on the top two in April or June. So we'll be back on this question. Any other thoughts? Does anyone not want us to vote for the Assessor-Recorder candidate? Probably not.
There's only one person.
Yeah. So, okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and conclude the discussion. Fill out your ballots. You should have them soon and send them in by February 15th.